Stanley, I've got two questions for you. One is kind of a process question, and one is a very substantive question. Joe, you mentioned in the back room there, the green room, that you were not able to include Joan's letter. You had planned to include that and some other letters. If you had had 15 more minutes, what would you have included that you had to cut? Tell us what would have been in there that was not.
You know, I have to say honestly that what happens for me a lot of times with films is once the film is cut and I start to see it cut, I kind of forget what I had to cut out. I just, you know, I kind of see it as a finished document. But the letter reminded me of Joan's letter. There were a couple of other letters that the freedom riders got in jail. And there were other letters, there was another couple of letters that they got of support from different people that were really inspirational. So those are some of the things. I think one of the last things we cut, which was kind of a complicated story, but all of the freedom riders had to go back to Mississippi afterwards for the arraignment, because one of the things that the state of Mississippi felt was they made all the freedom riders come back for an arraignment on the same day, and they all had to be there. And so it was over 400 people that had to come back, or else they would have forfeited their bail money, which was, I think, $500 or something times 400, which, you know, would have been a huge sum of money that a lot of it was paid by Corps. And so we had a story of all the people who came back, and they actually had to come back to Mississippi, and I think all but 5 or 6 came back to Mississippi for the arraignment, and it's really kind of a beautiful, beautiful emotional scene of all these freedom riders coming back. But we just felt that at that point, you know, the film was kind of winding down, and it was adding another story on when we were clearly coming to cutting the end of the story. So that was one of the last things that we cut.
Well, that's for the sequel.
Yeah.
It's coming, I'm sure. The subsequent question I have for you, one thing that really struck me in watching this, I'm researching a book right now on John F. Kennedy. This is a brutally honest film about the Kennedys, about even Martin Luther King. You know, often things that are produced today are sanitized because of the terrible tragedies that took the Kennedy brothers' lives and Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. It's sanitized. This was not sanitized at all, and you went back to that time and showed that, in fact, the Kennedys were not terribly pro-civil rights. In fact, it was viewed by them as a distraction from their focus on the Soviet Union and getting reelected, or getting elected and then getting reelected, and of course, the comments made about Dr. King because of his lack of participation. How did you come to grips with that, and how did you decide to resist the temptation that so many others have taken to sanitize history?
Well, I mean, I feel and I felt and I still feel that you know, you kind of make them stronger by making them human. You know, that you make Martin Luther King and the Kennedys stronger by showing that they did have flaws, that they weren't, you know, sent down from heaven by the gods, that they were humans, and that they developed as they went, and I think that makes them stronger. You know, and so there's that part of it. There's the other part as a filmmaker and as a storyteller where it's just a good story. You know, I mean, part of it, you know, and as we were cutting, there were people who, you know, were like, maybe you should cut that. And I just never felt that at all. I just felt like this just makes the story that much deeper and that much richer. And, you know, I don't think this film in any way takes away from the legacy of the Kennedys or Martin Luther King. I mean, you know, I can't do that. You know, this film is not big enough to do that. But I think it does make them human. I have young kids, you know, who are in 6th grade, and you know, they learn about this as, you know, this kind of great man theory of history. You know, that Martin Luther King was this great man, and you know, without Martin, you know, he kind of led everything. Without him, you know, nothing would have happened. And I think it's important for us to understand that, you know, that's not the way it was. That Martin Luther King was a great man, no doubt, but that these people, you know, also were great human beings, and without them, Martin Luther King couldn't have done what he did, or the Kennedys couldn't have done.
top-down movements at work. The bottom-up ones politicians don't tend to have an excess of courage. You know, I always say profiles of courage. John F. Kennedy wrote it kind of with Ted Sorensen. That's another story. But it was a very short volume. There aren't that many profiles of courage. Let me ask the other three panelists, again, go back to that time. Maybe you weren't that political back then, I don't know, but how did you view the Kennedys and Martin Luther King vis-a-vis what you were going through? How did you view them?
At the time, I thought the Kennedys were saints. I mean, I really did. I really thought that if the FBI were around, we were protected. Okay?
Well, you were being taped, that's for sure.
That's quite
I don't know about protected.
It didn't occur to me at the time that, hey, the FBI agents lived in those communities. They were at the same social functions, at the same country clubs as the bigots, the racists, etc. I mean, so you couldn't really expect them to violate their friendships, etc., or jeopardize their friendships. And I guess over the years, I began to know some of the realities of the situation as opposed to just holding everybody up as a great person or an honorable person for that matter.
At the time, you didn't see the Kennedys as dragging their feet on civil rights and having other priorities and not helping you?
At the time, no. Again, over time, I recognize that, and this is where I differ with the other two persons here.
Oh, good, let's have a fight.
Well, the issue of nonviolence. Some consider it a philosophy, and I consider it a tactic. There's no way in the world that if I were to walk out of here now, or even then, off of the picket line or off of the outside of the city, if someone struck me, I assure you, I would strike back. In fact, I'm digressing from the Freedom Ride, but during one of our sit-ins, and I think I was in Nashville at the time, somebody hit me and I lost it. And I took a punch. And it showed up in the news magazine the following week saying, a non-violent punch. But anyway, from my thinking, hey, look, we have no army, we have no tanks, we have no guns, and it would be simply foolish to try to, engage in a warfare.
Sure. Well, it was just a tap, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. We absolved you. Reginald and Joan, what's your reaction to that?
I think nonviolence is a goal. I think it's for me, more than a tactic and not quite a way of life, but it's still a goal. So when I spanked my kids, they certainly never thought that I was nonviolent. On the Kennedys, we wanted to believe the best in them. At the same time, the freedom rides were to try to force them to enforce the law. The civil rights movement was to try to get the federal law enforced, and it's the responsibility of the president, the attorney general, whoever they were, to enforce it. So you saw the weakness there, and there was some, at different points, understandings that they, really would just literally go away and disappear. On the other hand, in Mississippi, during my years as a student there, we knew our only hope was the federal government, and at least until he was assassinated, Kennedy was the symbol of the federal government and our last recourse. And I think our campus was the only place in Mississippi that no one was passing. That's an exaggeration, but we felt like it. And we were also shot up by those who were celebrating. So it's two-sided.
Good. Reginald? Yeah.
it's always interesting when you're looking back at through the eyes or through the lens to try to figure where was your mindset, where was your psyche in your younger years versus what you've learned through history recordings. I think many of us, as many young Americans, got caught up in the excitement of this new president. You know, and keep in mind, in the district, it was a while before we could even vote for a general office such as the presidency. Unlike other states, had that much longer than we did. So the excitement of, you know, the Camelot experience. I think what I appreciate more, getting back to your film presentation, is, and I still think responds to your question, is the reality that shows us that you have to be careful not to judge someone by one particular situation in their lives, but judge them based on, or a conclusion about them based on the sum total of what they've been able to do. So in that sense, I can appreciate, though at the moment, you know, unaware of certain things, the hesitancy, you know, I mean, Abraham Lincoln, for example, was very hesitant about it. If he could have dealt with saving the Union, saving the slave states, then what? He would have not dealt with the slavery issue. I think the same thing happened in this case as it relates to the freedom rights and civil rights. When your mind is focused on so much other stuff like food stamps and the Soviet Union, and here you are having to deal with also talking about the reputation abroad relative to what's going on in your hometown. I feel that the Kennedys still have high marks in terms of what he was able to do in that short time he had to do it. But we have to give much of the credit also to Lyndon Johnson, who put forward all the things. The flaws in a life, because we all have them. The biblical narrative demonstrates that, the flaws. If you look in the Bible, there are flaws in our character, in our lives. But when we can stretch and evolve, which is what I see happening as we look at the Kennedy administration. Nonviolence, you know, Joan has spoken to that. I kind of think I'm still rather nonviolent. Maybe it's my theological training that I have to live up to. And then I might respond one way versus what Dion might do. Maybe it'll take it a little more than Dion, but if Dion would have smacked me, I don't know if I would turn my other cheek.
That's wonderful. We are going to have an argument. See, it's like 3 by 8.